The Bible, the Old Testament especially, makes it very, very clear. You will be judged by how you treat the widows and the orphans. And not just you personally, but society, all of us, collectively. Most specifically the leaders, the princes, the rulers, the scribes, and the priests. I'm on the hook, maybe more than you are. And we know, or we say anyway, that God is on the side of the powerless, the little people, the least ones, the most vulnerable. Widows sort of instinctively seem to fit the bill, right? And we've probably heard, or maybe read, or at least thought the thought that in Bible times especially, women really had it hard. Women were defined by their relationship to men, and if you were a widow, then you didn't have a relationship to a man. Or more specifically, your relationship to men had been broken. And so you were powerless, vulnerable, little, least, lost, as in you lost everything, because everything you had and everything you were was tied to your husband. Remember Naomi and Ruth, the book of Ruth? Their husbands died, and Ruth's husband had been one of Naomi's two sons who had both died. So long story short, Ruth and Naomi were both widows. Naomi had no sons. They were homeless. They had lost everything. Widows, if they didn't have sons to look out for them especially, lost everything. And that is probably true through most of human history in pre-enlightened times, pre-human rights times. But the truth is that the Bible paints a little bit more of a blurry picture of how it went with widows, because losing everything is something that could happen. But it's not necessarily what would happen. Case in point, this widow that Elijah is brought to in Zarephath, in Sidon. She's gathering sticks to make one last fire so she can bake one last little loaf of bread so that she and her son can eat one last meal and then die. Hey, I didn't say she was doing great. But an important point in the story is that she has her own house still. She still lives at home. Great, right? She has a place to die in. Well, but over and over in the Bible, the voice of God through the prophets castigates the people, their leaders especially, for taking away the property rights of widows. It's literally that explicit. There was an Old Testament instruction for arranging a loan. It's in Deuteronomy 24. You can look it up. The person making the loan would take the cloak of the person receiving the loan as a pledge. What the pledge of the cloak meant was, if you don't pay back this loan, not I get to keep your nice cloak, but I get to move into your house. Because I'm wearing your cloak, your robe, I get to take on what is yours. I get to have it. And Deuteronomy says explicitly, do not do this. You may not do this to widows. You may not take a widow's garment as a pledge. You may not move into their houses. People did it anyway, of course. People exploited the widows, the powerless ones. It might be what happened to Naomi and to Ruth. Jesus says to his disciples later on in the Gospel of Luke, beware of the scribes, who like to walk around in long robes and who love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to have the best seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses. And for the sake of appearance, say long prayers. Jesus says they will receive the greater condemnation. Over and over, the Bible says, Jesus says, leave the widows alone. Don't take their houses. And evidently, the people around this widow that Elijah visits in Zarephath had listened to that. It's the positive interpretation, or they hadn't noticed her extreme vulnerability just yet. That's the cynical interpretation. In either case, she still has her house. But we know that it's more than just that. It's more than just leave them alone, don't take their houses. You will be judged over and over, the Bible says, by how you treat the widows and the orphans. Not just because it's the Bronze Age in the Bible and women and children are the powerless ones, they have nothing, but because it is up to you as a principle, eternally, society, rulers, powerful ones, people, it is up to you to determine how widows and orphans are going to be treated. Here, now, in the area that you control, in this place, in this time, it's up to you to determine whether the least, the powerless, the vulnerable among you are going to be protected or whether they are going to be duped, dispossessed, stolen from, here and now. It's up to you to determine how you're going to treat people who can't possibly give you any benefit in return, can't pay you back for what you did for them, don't have any power or any wealth to give you a transactional gain in exchange for your favor. Because doesn't how you treat the ones who are powerless, who can't do anything for you, who don't directly benefit you, doesn't whether you choose to protect them or whether you choose to exploit them, doesn't that say something important about what kind of person you are? About what kind of leader you are? About what kind of society you have? Doesn't how you treat those people indicate how your heart really is toward all people? The Bible makes it pretty clear that this is why God is concerned with this. Deuteronomy 24 says, if you go through and harvest your grapes and some stray grapes fall off the bunches and are left, do not go back and get them. Leave them for the widows and the orphans. And it says for the aliens, the foreigners, the immigrants. It also says if you shake your olive trees to get your olive crop and not all the olives fall off your olive trees, do not go back later and shake your olive trees again. Leave the rest for the widows and the orphans and the aliens. And Deuteronomy 24 also says, if you harvest your wheat and you can't carry all of your wheat back to the barn, do not go back to get the rest. Leave it there for the widows and the orphans and the aliens. And this is how Naomi and Ruth survived when they were homeless, because they were both widows and aliens. The letter of James says to the early Christian church, if any of you think they're religious and do not bridle their tongues but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. The true religion is to care for the orphans and the widows, the powerless, the ones that don't benefit you. But my favorite voice of God moment in the whole Bible about this is in the beginning of Isaiah, where God starts out by saying, ho, sinful nation, people laden with iniquity, offspring who do evil, children who deal corruptly, who have forsaken the Lord, who have despised the Holy One of Israel, who are utterly estranged. Okay, that sounds bad. And that also sounds somewhat familiar, like something that people say these days even. How have we reached such a terrible state as a nation? After some really pointed criticism of performative religiosity, too many worship services, too many sacrifices. God says, when you stretch out your hands, I will hide my eyes from you. Even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. But But then finally, the voice of God tells them what the problem is. Not enough of wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your doings from before my eyes, cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, plead for the widow. This, the voice of God makes very, very clear, is the standard I'm going to judge you by, the determining line between whether you are godly or godless. Did you take care of these people? Did you stand up for them? But really, it's not just about these people, these poor people, these lowly ones over there somewhere. Because it's not just we who are blessed, benevolently extending charitable goodwill to those who are destitute, who are widowed and orphaned and least. It's, did you take care of each other? Did you establish that as a rule and a spirit and a way among you? Because Elijah says to the widow, the one who at least still has her house, give me something to eat and drink. And we assume, reading the story, hearing it, that he's the powerful person here, right? The leader, the prophet of God, the one who's here to help her. Except he was just dying of thirst next to a dried up stream. When he says, bring me a drink, he's not putting her through some test from God. He actually literally needs a drink. He needs her help. Somehow in this moment, the man sent from God has even less than she does. She has nothing. She and her son are about to die. And Elijah says, no, but trust me, please help me. Do what you know you're supposed to do. Be the person you're supposed to be, you person of faith, the person you claim that you are. Even if it kills you, the voice says. Be who you are. And so she is. And so she does. Like another widow that Jesus talks about, she puts her whole life on the line. She puts everything that she has in, while people who are much better off walk right on by, don't even notice. And so, just so, her faith is rewarded. The jar of meal does not run out. The jug of oil does not fail. The whole household, it says, is able to eat. The whole household. Maybe that's saying that there are more people interconnected with her, dependent on her survival, than it at first appears in the story. Maybe there's a few Ruths hanging around with her somewhere. They were all able to eat. Elijah and the widow and her son and her whole household. Like Tiny Tim, they did not die. And maybe, just maybe, that's saying if we all take care of each other, if we relieve the oppressed and defend the defenseless and stand up for the vulnerable, if we all trust in who we are called to be and in who is calling us to be who we are, we will, all of us, survive. We will, all of us, be able to live.